Hey, good morning, everybody. It's Friday. Yeah, almost the weekend. You're welcome. You're back here with Law and Legitimacy. Norm and Mike. We're breaking it down for you every day. Quick update before we get to the Donald. And who is this young raccoon dog? You notice that over there? Mike asked me about it this morning. How come you haven't said anything? I thought it was just a Southern thing. I mean, you got to have like a raccoon dog in your life.
A young raccoon dog. Oh, no,
But instead, he's mocked.
That's how I got COVID. I was petting. I went to the local pet store and they had these like little raccoon dog puppies and I was playing with them and I ended up with COVID. At least that's what I've been told happened.
And you spread it throughout the world. I was working in a weaponized lab funded by United States tax dollars, on a virus, when all of a sudden I coughed, knocked over a vial of stuff, and it went out the window and it contaminated the world. The Chinese government bought me off and told me to be silent. But I can't talk about it.
Well, then that's what that commotion was outside. I think the pet store was right beside where you were in that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We were in Wuhan that weekend. Remember? It was our Wuhan weekend. Day 61 in the United States of America versus Biggs et al. Is today. And today, Mr. Biggs will begin to present some of his defense. It won't be the most spine-tingling day in a courtroom. We're going to play a 97-minute video of the leadership of the Proud Boys talking about how to prepare for January 6th. Newsflash. They didn't have a conspiracy on their mind. They were trying to figure out how to herd cats. And we'll read some stipulations, the most interesting of which, and will likely make the news, if anything makes the news other than Donald Trump this week, is that the federal government has entered into a stipulation, an agreement with us that there were at least eight confidential human sources with access to Proud Boys reporting to the FBI in the weeks leading up to January 6th. They won't say more, but that's all right. We just wanted to acknowledge.
That's solid.
Yeah. So off we go. And yesterday, I announced I was going to have to apologize because I made some off-color remarks about the length of a prosecutor's cross-examination, tweeted them in a moment of tedium in the courtroom, and it was immediately picked up by a news person covering the trial and associated with the name of the prosecutor, whom I respect. So yesterday I went to him and I said, I am a member of AA, that would be Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't always make all 12 steps every day. I do think the world of you, and I apologize. It was beneath me, and you didn't deserve it. And he graciously put his hand out and said, apology accepted. These things happen in court. After months of litigation, months of dozen lawyers crammed into a confined space objecting to everything, these things will happen. So off we go into the wild blue yonder today, off to court. We have only a half day on Friday. I'll present several hours of evidence, and then the weekend will begin. And I will read newspapers compulsively, trying to figure out what's going on with Donald Trump. I guess the Manhattan grand jury voted to indict the president. The indictment is yet to be unsealed, but it seems to be that this is going to be falsifying business records. These are the reports in connection with...
Slow up. Check the screen. Look at Freedom Lover. I have you on my TV this morning, my 70-inch screen. Now I actually know what you look like. My old eyes can't see much on a phone screen. Good morning.
I guess we should do the wave or something, like really, on a 70-inch TV. Good morning, Freedom Lover. That's actually sort of frightening. I want you to think back quick. It's 1984. There's a blank screen in every room. You don't know if Big Brother is watching, so you better behave, because even when you're doing your exercise video in the morning, or your exercise routine, your state mandated exercise routine in the morning, Big Brother could be watching. Big Brothers are watching. Mike, say something to Freedom Lover.
Hey, Freedom Lover. Hey.
Do you have a cat or a dog? That'll get him stirred up, or so we hope. But thanks for checking in, Freedom Lover. Back to the Donald. He's been indicted, and it won't be charges directly relating to payment of hush money to porn star Stormy Daniels to keep her silent over their alleged affair. The statute of limitations has run on that, and both the federal government and the Federal Elections Commission have already opined on that and passed on a prosecution. There could have been motives unrelated to his run for president to making that payment, aka I don't want my wife to know. And so we are likely to see a prosecution that says that somehow business records were fudged to make the payment's purpose opaque or unknown or unreviewable. And I'm like, really? I mean, we're going to have the first ever indictment of a former president of the United States, or the first ever charging of a former president of the United States for a crime, and it's going to be over failure to keep good business records. I
Yeah,
mean,
and not just to go on top of that, an active candidate for president of the United States as well. So you've got two things here, which just makes this like a fact pattern that you really would have to make up on a law school exam otherwise, right? You've got a former president of the United States and an active candidate for president of the United States being charged with falsification of business records.
well, here's where the rubber is likely to meet the road, and perhaps immediately. Once the indictment is served, once Mr. Trump is arrested, he falls under the jurisdiction of the court, and the trial judge will have inherent supervisory authority over the course of the proceedings. New York State, or people of New York versus Donald Trump, and among the powers the judge may seek to usurp, and this could be the most fascinating part of the case, will be a gag order. And it's not unusual for courts to issue gag orders on trial participants. Now, lawyers have professional responsibilities not to make extrajudicial comments that can adversely affect the fairness of the judicial proceedings.
Which makes what you do every day here all the more impressive, right? I just would like to say that you are you do things that other attorneys would just be scared out of their wits to do. So,
well, I've litigated these issues to the state Supreme Court on behalf of Alex Jones, and tried to litigate these issues to the U.S. Supreme Court. They wouldn't hear it. I had these the precise issues that Donald is likely to face in front of the Connecticut Supreme Court in a case that I am obliged not to say more about than the following. Fotis Doulos, a man accused of killing his wife. A gag order was imposed in that case against not just me, but the client. And in the Alex Jones case, Jones was sanctioned for extrajudicial, that is, out of court statements he made about opposing counsel, or allegedly about opposing counsel. And we took that up to the state Supreme Court on an emergency basis, saying, hey, wait a minute. Fair trial rights, which are the source of gag orders, trying to assure that a defendant will have a fair trial, those are Sixth Amendment rights. And guess what, folks? The state doesn't have Sixth Amendment rights to a fair trial. I said this in court the other day in the Proud Boys case, where there were senior prosecutors who were talking about an issue arising out of the Sixth Amendment. And I said, Judge, don't be seduced into thinking for a moment that the government has Sixth Amendment rights. And, I saw the prosecutors looking at one another like they'd never thought about this before. But read the Sixth Amendment. It guarantees to the accused certain rights. It doesn't guarantee a damn thing to the government. So the rights to a fair trial that a court imposes in a gag order come from its inherent authority. That is, its inherent authority to see that justice is done. It doesn't have to be spelled out in a statute or in a constitutional provision. So my prediction is that Donald Trump, while running for president, may be faced with a gag order. And that will be, as Mike points out, the perfect storm of an issue to go right up to the United States Supreme Court as quickly as possible, because he will claim that this is a political prosecution, motivated and designed to silence and impair his prospects. And the prosecution will say, oh no, a duly constituted grand jury considered the evidence and found there was probable cause to believe there was a crime. We now want a fair trial. Mr. Trump is making extrajudicial comments that are prejudicial to the people's case, and we will not be able to get a fair trial if he doesn't knock it off. Or in the alternative, if he keeps making, that is, Mr. Trump keeps making statements that sound threatening of Mr. Bragg, we're going to eliminate him, we're going to exterminate him, whatever it is that he's saying. If he keeps making statements of that sort, the court could reach out, as it did in the Alex Jones case, and say that it wants to protect trial participants. You may remember at one point in the Alex Jones case, he went on an epic rant on InfoWars after learning that his discovery compliance in this case, he turned over about 90,000 emails, and buried in those emails were some unopened child pornography files that had been sent from third parties into InfoWars. They never opened them, and they were detected by the plaintiffs, who sent them off to the FBI. The FBI determined they they'd never been opened. There was no evidence of a crime of anybody in the case. Jones went on InfoWars and said he suspected the plaintiffs and their lawyers may have done this in an effort to entrap him, in an effort to try, to gain leverage over him. And he offered $100,000. No, make that $1 million as a reward for the head on the pike of whoever did this. And he raised his suspicions that it was plaintiff's counsel. The trial judge sanctioned him for this by refusing to hear certain of his pretrial motions. We took that to the Supreme Court, saying that Mr. Jones's speech was protected. It wasn't a true threat. It wasn't incitement to violence. It wasn't defamatory. He didn't do anything that the law prohibits. Therefore, sanctioning him for exercising protected speech violated his First Amendment rights. The Connecticut Supreme Court heard argument on this, and it took them 14 months to find a way to hurt Jones, but they found one. And they couldn't conclude that
besides waiting that long to issue an order.
Other
than that, there was no prejudice. Okay.
Yeah. Other than that, so it concluded that while he didn't violate the law, he violated, the court's inherent supervisory authority to protect trial participants justified the actions of the judge, who in my view is a constitutional nitwit, meaning a nitwit about the United States Constitution. I don't know how she's constituted. I hope never to find out. I predict, and you heard it here first,
a nitwit of constitutional proportions.
I predict, and you heard it here first on Law and Legitimacy, that one of the first significant conflicts in the trial will be the judge seeking to impose a gag order on Trump, and Trump's lawyers will immediately seek to get that reviewed by a higher court on the grounds that he's running for president of the United States. And if ever the speech of a person should be protected, it should be at that moment above all moments. And then the issue will become, how does the court balance the people's right to a fair trial against the people's right to hear from their candidate? And we've never had that case arise.
Look, House of Cards season 3472 is, wild right now. I've never seen this. This has to be the most watched story in the world right now. This trumps, pardon the stupid pun, this trumps everything. Because I think about, we were talking last week about extradition, right? And whether certain crimes involving, Stormy Daniels, the alleged payment for a quote unquote hush money, blah, blah, blah. And what charges Fat Alvin Bragg would bring pursuant to a grand jury indictment. No one was I don't know that I heard anyone say falsification of business records as to be the target here.
Well, if you weren't listening to Uncle Norm, because I said it's going to have to be something with how they maintain their records. We did foreshadow that here,
Well, in terms of I guess the names involved, Michael Cohen, Stormy Daniels, the year of all this, it was all related to federal elections issues, right? More regulatory oriented issues. And we discussed that federal prosecutors and the FEC declined to pursue charges on any of the subject matter within this umbrella. And yet here we are. I think that this is probably the most interesting thing politically that has happened in my life, my 33 years here on the planet. There is a former president running for a second term who is not currently the president, being indicted for business records, falsification, allegedly. And we haven't seen the indictment. And then now, Norm, what you're saying to me seems completely obvious. Freedom Lover asks, do you think it's a political prosecution? I think it definitely is. I think history will look upon this as a de facto political prosecution if a gag order is issued, because one can argue that we can fight as long as the fight is fair, right? However, if a gag order issues on the facts here, there will be a massive, massive, massive pushback from the political side.
And the case, there's a saying among lawyers that bad facts make bad law. And so, what we have here now is a presidential candidate about to be charged with a crime, who can't keep his mouth shut. And in this instance, perhaps ought not to keep his mouth shut and has every right, in my view, to opine about the nature of this this prosecution and those prosecuting him. The court is going to instinctually say, you've got to rein it in, Donald, and it's going to be tempted to impose a gag order, because if it doesn't in the Trump case, how's it going to do so in anyone else's case? In Joe the cab driver's case, and there can't be two tiers, two standards of justice etched over the portal of the United States Supreme Court, equal justice under the law. And we say that we're a rule of laws and not men. Now, what keeps lawyers busy and keeps the midnight oil burning in many a law office is the drawing of meaningful distinctions. So it may be that we get a body of law that says candidates for public office can't be gagged when they're charged with crimes. It may be that that's how this case ends up being decided. Next major issue I think that we'll see is the change of venue motion. Now, I don't remember how many of you have seen the movie The Fugitive. This was inspired by the Sam Shepard case. Sam Shepard was accused of killing his wife in I think the greater Cleveland area sometime in the 1950s, and he was tried in Ohio amid circus-like environment. The United States Supreme Court said he was convicted. He took his appeal to the Ohio Supreme Court. It sustained his conviction, and then none other than F. Lee Bailey, as a young lawyer, argued a habeas corpus appeal before the U.S. Supreme Court, saying that his fair trial rights were denied because of the circus-like environment obtaining in the courtroom and outside the courtroom because of the massive media publicity. And Shepard's conviction was reversed. Now, in the Trump case, there will be a change of venue motion. The claim will be that given Manhattan's demographics and voting patterns and Trump's history there in the city, it'll be impossible to get a fair trial. And Trump will spend money on statistical studies and surveys and attitudinal surveys of the community. And he will come up with an impressive body of data that will say to the judge, 95% of people in the community have decided against me. However, as we saw in the Jeff Skilling case just recently arising out of Enron in Houston, similar hostility to Skilling in Houston after Enron collapsed, destroying the pensions of many people in that community. He was a much hated man, did not yield a change of venue motion. And most judges, when faced with a change of venue motion, will say on the papers, denied. Let's see what happens during jury selection. So here in Washington, D.C., it was very difficult to sit a jury in the Joe Biggs case, in the Proud Boys case. We began jury selection on January 2nd. Typically, federal jury selection takes a day, maybe two. It took us 12 days to get the jury. And we argued at the time, and should there be a conviction, we'll argue on appeal, there should have been a change of venue. So Trump will make a change of venue motion in Manhattan, and he may well make a change of venue motion in Manhattan. And if he does, he's likely to lose it, and the trial judge will say, let's try to pick the jury and see what happens. That's been the response every time I've tried to raise a change of venue in a high-profile case. But this is where Donald Trump's lawyers are going to have to earn those big fees that he probably will stiff them on. If Donald is half the theater, if Donald is half the thespian, and I didn't say lesbian, go back, do your replay, freedom lover. We did not call Donald Trump a lesbian. If Donald Trump is half the thespian, the actor that I think he is, he will not file a speedy trial motion. And the reason a change of venue motion, and I gave my punchline away. And the reason he won't is what he really wants is a speedy trial, because this puts him back in the limelight in much the same way that he was in 2015 when he announced. The press was incredulous, and it became a source of mockery and public fascination, this train wreck of a candidacy that was going nowhere, the one-way road to defeat. And Donald got all that free publicity that helped mobilize a nation behind him and get him elected president. He's going to want this trial.
Absolutely.
He's going to want it publicized. And if he files a change of venue motion, the clock stops ticking on a speedy trial motion. So if I'm Donald Trump's lawyers, or I'm on that team, and you can find me, Donald, but I do want payment up front. If I'm on that team, the first question he has to be asked is, do you want your trial quickly? And if, in my view, is you should, because you can mobilize, you can use this as a source of publicity to bolster your brand among people who feel alienated by the political process. And you can use this as a campaign platform, as crazy as it sounds. But if you file a change of venue motion, the speedy trial clock stops. In other words, when a defendant files a motion and has it pending before the court, his right to have a trial quickly is stopped in its track until those motions are decided. So the gutsy move for Trump would be to sit with his legal team and say, this prosecution is an outrage. I want it attacked on every dimension, but publicly. And by way of publicity, we'll do our talking in court, but I don't want motions filed that are going to delay the proceedings. So what would what that would mean is that he would bait the Manhattan District Attorney's Office into bringing this case to trial as quickly as possible, and then roll everything, his legal strategy, into motions made during trial, including a motion for judgment of acquittal at the close of the state's case or the people's case, saying that they haven't proven a case that a jury could find him guilty on. Gutsy moves, huge strategic considerations. I'm seeing Cernovich's tweet. Mike's got it up there. I don't see the math of how this helps Trump in the general election.
I brought this up because I think that what you just provided would be a potential to perhaps shift Cernovich's perception of this, because what you just talked about is more about velocity than the substance of the charges itself. I think Cernovich regards these as like fake Trump thing, and anything that happens after this is going to be perceived as fake and phony. But when he's talking about, I don't see the math of how this helps Trump in the general election. The reference is obviously to all of the people that were talking last week about Trump trying to raise money on this and doing so being a huge grift, taking advantage of people, etc. And ultimately now we do have news of an indictment forthcoming. And in and among all the chatter last week, particularly of those who are on the side of DeSantis, who still hasn't announced that he's running for president, but we might get to some of that in just a second. But they were saying that this was something that would inarguably inure to Trump's benefit. This issue with, state District Attorney Alvin Bragg, Cernovich saying that he doesn't understand how this would help Trump or the math behind that. I think that you just introduced a variable, Norm. Humbly, I think you just introduced a variable that actually might affect the math and would indeed help Trump in the general election. If he is able to get his attorneys to press this case and do one of two things, either substantively get the case to move quickly, or two, transparently and using this transparently as a mechanism to show that they are purposefully slow dragging the case so that there is no news on it to avoid, then he's going to affect the math that I think Cernovich references here.
Well, yeah, I don't know what Mike means by the math. I mean, if it's, in terms of the electorate, and those who are diehard anti-Trumpers, well, of course, this just sets the concrete around their feet ever more firmly. Those who are in the middle and undecided, a certain number of them will say the man's been indicted, he must be guilty, and that'll push them off. But as to Trump's supporters, I think this mobilizes and fires up his base, because Trump is now a martyr. The question for the math is, how many people in disaffected America, how many undecideds are there who are going to be persuaded to vote for a man who's under indictment? And that I don't know anything about the electorate. I don't know the polling numbers. I don't know where people are. I'm talking simply from Trump's perspective as an edge player. Timing wise, Saifullah Khan raises, why did it take them so long to charge him? Because they're grasping at straws. And the prior district attorney thought that there was nothing there. Bragg's decided to take another look, and I think he's trying to make political hay out of this. Will the trial end before the general elections? That's up to Donald Trump. The huge, really the strategic consideration for Camp Donald right now is how to quickly get this case to trial while preserving his legal rights and remedies and avoid a gag order. because what he wants to do, in my view, is make this into an opportunity to expand on his platform. A trial judge is likely to try a gag order here, and if Donald is gagged, and the case drags on, that's the best of all worlds for the Democrats and for Alvin Bragg. So I think he has to break the mold. He has to tell his legal team, I'm Donald Trump, and you're going to be fired if you don't do the impossible. Get me to trial as quickly as I can and defeat this unlawful gag order by these tyrants.
Yeah. Lawyer Will makes a statement in the Rumble chat here. He says Trump will also get indicted in Georgia. Again, I've brought this up before where I've said that there are 4 ongoing issues affecting Trump: the January 6th investigation, the Georgia election issue, this New York Manhattan DA issue, as well as the Mar-a-Lago raid and the classified documents issue. So we're really only on one of those 4 right now. And so yes, I agree with you. I think that the best is yet to come if you're a Democrat hoping that that Trump is going to be steamrolled into not being able to run an effective campaign into 2024.
And Jeremiah Sala raises a great point. If Trump broke the law, it doesn't matter.
This is not a great point, but please go ahead.
Well, if he broke the law, it doesn't matter what job he's applying for. That's fair. Nobody's above the law. Nobody else gets to say, you can't indict me, I'm applying for a certain job. That's true, too. We have no kings in America. Well, I doubt that's true. I think we have plenty of them. They just run silent empires. But, the point is, if this is a pretextual prosecution, if this is politically driven, then I do think he gets to run and say, you've indicted me under false pretenses, and I'm going to challenge you and take it to you. And this is an example of how power gets corrupted in the United States. And that will become Trump's campaign theme. So, I'm with Jeremiah on no one being above the law. Apparently, the indictment was lawfully obtained. We'll find out in trial and in pretrial proceedings.
That's just such a boring comment. It's such a sterile observation of what's going on with Donald Trump. I mean, we're talking. This is the same guy who was impeached how many times? I lost count. Right? There was the Steele dossier, the P tapes, Russia collusion, everything. This guy has been embattled for the last 10 years. It feels like at this point. And we're talking about if Trump broke the law, it doesn't matter what job he was applying for.
This is the same kind of comment.
It's so sterile, and it's indicative of the people who, substitute your candidate of choice, Jeremiah, into the fact pattern that I just rolled back in brief, and then see if what you're saying holds water to you. That's the problem. We are in the most polarized time in modern history in America right now, and that kind of comment does not get us anywhere closer to resolving whatever the fracture is. So
I have a challenge. I go to Jeremiah Sala's feed, and I'll bet you this week he's probably opined that trans people are being oppressed, as the shooting in Nashville proves. I mean, somehow this shooting has become a rallying cry for trans rights. And the shooter was a trans person, and obviously only decided to shoot and kill 3 young people and 3 teachers because trans don't have enough rights. I don't know. I mean, it's a crazy world. But let's go. We're getting short on time.
One joke here. We don't have to get to the DeSantis stuff, but I want to share a Hotep Jesus tweet that I thought was very funny and perhaps prescient. 2024 will see the equivalent of a trans version of George Floyd incident. Bookmark this.
No, that's really true. And I think we saw a little bit of that yesterday. I mean, what was this business about storming the Tennessee Capitol? My Twitter feed was alive. Oh, there's another insurrection. Are we going to see arrests here? And apparently there's going to be trans activism in the capitals around the country. And if somebody gets hurt, I suppose we're going to all be having bumper stickers that say trans lives matter. And, you'll be offered dentures in the form of a rainbow so that when you smile, your teeth won't be white, God forbid. They won't be black. That might be a sign of bad dental health. But when it comes to mental health, your teeth will glow with the colors of the rainbow. Use our new toothpaste, LGBTQ. It brings out the difference in you.
Have you had to buy any more Crest yet? How many years have you been in DC on this trial?
I don't know, but I know I'm behind. I'm going to extend my Airbnb for another 10 days or so. I'm expecting that we will get a verdict here. My prediction is by the week. I think by April 20th or thereabouts, whatever that Friday is. I think we'll likely get to the jury Not next week, but the following. The jury, they could return a verdict in a day or two. There'll be 50 or so decisions to make. I'm hoping that they'll be thoughtful about it, but I don't think they'll want to come back for a third week of deliberations. So I've gone through a few tubes of Crest down here, but I haven't used my LGBTQ toothpaste. And I think, Mike, there's marketing magic in this. LBGTQ. It brings out the difference in you. And then and then the guy smiles, and you got the colors of the rainbow across his teeth. I'm buying it. You know?
No, he wasn't ready. He wasn't ready.
Well, we didn't talk about Ron de Sanctimonious, as Laura Loomer calls him. I guess we'll have to get to him another time. As developments occur, we may or may not hit you on Sunday. Mike and I haven't talked about that, but there may be so much going on that he and I can't keep our mouths shut, and we like to find our way, and we need to find our way back on air. So there you have it. Oh, I see a lot of comments here. Justin Carter, Jeremiah, Freedom Lover. Hey, we're at it. So. Yeah,
Justin Carter says, I like Mad Boyer. No, you don't. No one does. But these sorts of things, and I invite that sort of criticism. I think that what's going to make this show grow into the full embodiment of what we have envisioned is for people to bring those observations here and subject them to real cross-examination. We don't live in a vacuum. So
wait a minute. Is Freedom Lover right? Did Joe Biden make today Trans Day? Judge, I gotta call in. I don't know if my libidinal attitude is rightly adjusted.
Oh my God! Well, I did see that his press secretary yesterday was saying that that the trans community was under attack right now, et cetera, et cetera. And I think my comment to that was just wow. You remember when 81 million of us voted for this completely legitimate administration? Good times.
And Jeremiah Sal is having a good time with us, and we're having a good time with him. Jeremiah, if you can't see the difference between a pretextual prosecution between business records and shooting somebody on Fifth Avenue, we can't help you. But thanks for listening.
Yeah, thank you for listening. Come back on Monday and we'll keep talking about it. Again, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, Overcast every day. So for you audio-only listeners, we love you and we appreciate you. And for everybody here, please remember to first and foremost, subscribe, like this video. I think, yesterday we had a down day and my thoughts are that perhaps Rumble was trying to forestall growth of the Nashville news. So we can attribute it to that. But ultimately, if you do go back to yesterday's stream video, I talk a little bit about the subscription badges. We would love to have each of you consider purchasing a badge, even for 1 month, for $5. You'll get a preferred status here in Rumble, whatever that means. And as Norm and I continue to build this plane as we fly it, you will get better and better seats. I assure you.
Well, listen, I got to get ready for court, so you know what that means. Objection. Objection. Judge, can you hear me? Objection.
Overruled.
I'm ready. See you all next week.
See you later, Norm.